Today is January 17th, 2014. Welcome to episode 76 of Let's Talk Bitcoin, a twice-weekly show about the ideas, people, and projects building the digital economy and the future of money. Visit us at letstalkbitcoin.com for our daily guest blog, all our past episodes, and of course, tipping addresses. My name is Adam B. Levine. Today we're talking about the possibilities to really shake things up in the United States. Connie Galippi is the founder and executive director of the BitGive Foundation. Recently, Stephanie caught up with Connie to talk about her origins, women in Bitcoin, the potential for charity, the types of help they need, and of course, lots more. But first, Congressman Steve Stockman joined LTB's Jonathan Mohan at the recently opened New York Bitcoin Center on New Year's Eve for a wide-ranging talk on Bitcoin's disruptive potential and the possibility of a bill that will make everybody leave Bitcoin alone for at least a year or so. We'll get right into it. Enjoy the show.
So I'm joined right now with Congressman Steve Stockman at the New York Bitcoin Center on New Year's Eve. Thank you so much for coming out.
This is like the greatest party, the smartest people, just really a vibrant party, and I'd rather be here than in Times Square any day.
I'm so glad to hear that. So can you tell me a little bit about your background and about Bitcoin?
I was in Congress in the 90s, and then for almost a generation, I was not in Congress. Took care of my dad, who has Alzheimer's, and he passed away. And I got back involved in Congress, and I wanted a seat in Texas called District 36. Texas picked up 4 seats, and one of those open seats was District 36, which represents Houston, goes all the way over to the Louisiana border, and it part of, if anybody knows Charlie Wilson's, it's probably Charlie Wilson's old seat. And we have about 87 refineries. We produce half all the gasoline in the United States.
Oh. So what was your process about learning about Bitcoin?
Well, I've always been interested in technology that changes fundamentally, dynamic changes. I think things such as the 3D printer, nanotubes, and Bitcoin are going to be what we call industry disruption, in which changes things fundamentally. And it's a very exciting time to live in the world today because of these upcoming technologies. Right now, if you look at Bitcoin and the history of Bitcoin, it wasn't started out as a sea change. But if you look at the future and the possibilities of Bitcoin, it'll be a fundamental change. It could be a world currency, much like the dollar is, only I think it'd be more efficient and in a greater capacity than the US dollar. I'm not saying it's going to replace the dollar. However, I think it will eliminate a lot of barriers and increase commerce, which is always a good thing for the world and individuals.
Now, as someone who's in politics, it's kind of refreshing to hear someone be so free market. What do you see as the place for regulation in Bitcoin in America, and how do you think regulation could affect America's place in the Bitcoin community?
Well, I think there's some concern, if you put Bitcoin on your laptop page, you may have someone hack your computer and steal it. There's also a question of taxation, which I personally think that if you look at the internet, there was no taxation of the internet, because the argument at that time was that it was a small industry, you need to let it grow organically and without interference from the government. And I would argue that Bitcoin is similar, that if we interfere in the market and the way it develops, you could interfere with industries yet known. No one predicted that the internet would be such a sea change. I mean, it changed the way airline tickets are, it changed the way newspapers are. It's just changed the world, and that is true of Bitcoin. The potential there is great, but if we stomp on it and eliminate it in its infancies because of threats to people that are in power, we could eliminate a lot of industries and, quite frankly, a lot of jobs.
And what's your take on the alphabet soup of government agencies that are here to protect us, when, like, their opinion of Bitcoin, when they say, hey, look, you have Silk Road out there. How is it that you're able to see past that when a lot of your other congressmen kind of don't?
Well, think about this. Everybody that's in government, particularly what's called administrative law, their purpose to be in administrative law is to create laws without really the preview of the Congress. If you have someone that's in administrative law in developing and pushing an agenda, then when you strip them from their power, that eliminates their really the functionality of their purpose of their job. So they feel threatened by anything that liberates individuals. Now, I'm for liberation of individuals. In fact, I have a hard time, whether you're Democrat or Republican, why you vote for someone to say, for instance, I'm fat, I want to reduce the number of calories, therefore, I'm going to go out and vote for someone that's going to pass a law that says I can't eat. What's puzzling to me, it's much more simpler, just if you don't want to eat, do that. Don't impose this on other people. Give people free choice. But currently, the way it operates, people vote for people that pass more laws, more restrictions. Throughout the world, if you do an analysis of the countries which are the most free, they're the wealthiest. Individuals make better choices for themselves than having someone up in Washington making choices for you.
I know there are a lot of anarchists and hardcore libertarians who say, well, the best way Bitcoin can get on White House on Capitol Hill is just to completely ignore it and have them deal with it on their own. But like, for the people who want to engage civically as it relates to Bitcoin, how could we do that?
I would suggest that they do like many other organizations, whether it's a gun rights group or international group, that you do a survey and send out to all the congressmen and senators that are running for office, independents, Democrats, Republicans, libertarians, and ask them where they stand. It's not fair to judge someone without knowing where they stand. Now, if you know where they stand and they're against it, then that's fine to criticize. But you may have many more allies than you realize. So the best thing is communicate and do that through a survey. A politician is just a person who decided to run for office. They eat, they breathe, they go to bed. They're not evil people. There are some evil people, but by and large, they're just normal people that work really hard. And I would recommend that you ask them. Now, in the beginning, you won't get a lot of answer in your surveys, but publish that. Refuse the answer. As time goes on, there'll be more and more people starting to answer, and your issues and concerns will be brought forward. So I'd recommend communicating through surveys and getting their opinions. If you don't do that, it's not really fair to criticize someone if you never ask them.
Right. And kind of the fear when it comes to like all the entrepreneurial and the tech literate sort of community is that Congress has a habit of litigating on a topic when they're not fully on board.
And they litigate 20 years after it's relevant. They're just now learning about fax machines. They're probably,
There are some laws that affect the internet that predate the internet, and
correct.
We kind of are afraid about what they might do, like even if we were to engage them and they're like, okay, this is something that I need to make a part of my campaign, they're not going to go the extra step of actually learning about it to make that informed decision. But
in fairness, tonight I met a lot of people who want government interceding on behalf of Bitcoin, and that's a double-edged sword. If you want government to step in, and in addition to being positive, you're going to have some negatives. If you create a governmental body to oversee Bitcoin, then that governmental body will be dictated by the people in power. And my concern is that if you create a governmental body to intercede on Bitcoin, then you will upset the whole purpose for which you have in Bitcoin. I think the purpose of Bitcoin, in my view, is fundamentally the freedom of individuals and to keep them free. Now, if you start interfering and suggesting that government interferes, much like they do in schools, they say, hey, we need government to do this and this, and all of a sudden the parents start realizing, hey, we don't have access to what our kids are studying, we don't have access to the tests they're taking, but we want government to pay for it. It's a two-edged sword. So I'd be very cautious asking government to intercede. I would like to see the Bitcoin community to come up with self-regulation and to outline some basic principles to operate by. Which tonight I met, ironically, very many libertarians wanting government, which to me is fundamentally different than what libertarian stands for. So be very careful when you ask government to intercede. It's a two-edged sword, and you may regret asking the wolf get in the chicken house.
We're kind of at the eye of Saruman here in New York when it comes to financial law. When it comes to operating a Bitcoin business, it currently, FinCEN states, you're a money transmitter. And New York states, we are granting no money transmitter licenses to Bitcoin companies. So it's sort of this draconian catch-22.
Well, it's a very threatening thing. If you're in an industry, think about it. The brick and mortar industry, at first ignored, then they felt threatened. Look at the music industry. Remember, until Steve Jobs came up with iTunes, they're being decimated in the industry, and it's still having changes.
There's actually a recent study that found that the people to whom pirate music actually do it on the music that is harder to find, and that the people who are more likely to pirate actually spend more on music than the average consumer. So there's actually now evidence to even show that as it relates to piracy, it actually increases purchasing of music, because what happens is you sample it and then you buy it.
But exactly, but remember what happened, the industry felt threatened and they started suing people. You have the same similar circumstance here. Is when you create a currency, technically a computer currency, the people feel threatened now, the people that have influence over the dollar. And if you start saying, well, we're threatening the dollar, you're going to have a lot of people in power in very peripheral places that feel threatened. Now, it may not be actually threatening them, and I think they can coexist, but the perception of a threat will dictate action. And so we got to be very careful. We're not threatening the dollar currency, but it is a competing way to free up markets.
So when we're talking about competition, I love the fact that people never see the dollar as a monopoly. Bitcoin is giving us this viable competitor to the dollar because you can't shut it down like you did with Liberty Dollars.
And you're not, unless they decide this, but right now you're not printing $85 billion in Bitcoin every month.
So what's your opinion of this 100-year experiment called the Federal Reserve?
Well, it's ironic because we just celebrated the 100th year, and as you know, it was Wilson who also created the federal income tax. So he created a dragon with two heads, and I would argue that we'd probably have lost unknown wealth in this nation. We're going to soon fall behind China in terms of wealth creation, which is ironic because they're supposedly a socialist country, which I think in reality they're more of a fascist country because they're in joint operation with corporations.
I mean, I love this argument of calling another nation fascist when we pretend that Goldman Sachs doesn't buy out both parties' presidential candidates.
Well, no, I would argue that we do have some fascism in that the definition, as I understand fascism, is the cooperation with government and industry. And I'd have to say GE is very much in that mode that they rely heavily on government and government intervention, and so would be AIG. They got bailouts, so it would be GM, or we tease, it's called Government Motors, which, by the way, the mainstream media say we lost no money on. That's an absolute lie. We lost billions of dollars, and they said, well, it was a great, successful experiment, but on the other hand, we don't know what would have happened if it was diminished, would there have been a new industry that was created better than what we got.
So this bill that you're proposing, well, what is it and how could people give input?
Here's exactly what I want to do. They can get on our website and give us feedback.
And your website is?
It's Stockman 2014. But the thing is, you shoot us an email, we get it. But what I want to do is I want to include the comments. Now, I know whatever bill we're going to introduce, people are going to be ticked off, but at least it starts a conversation and it creates awareness. But my main goal of the bill...
So just interject, for all those trolls out there, You just heard a congressman say that internet comments will be read. So if you go to Stockman 2014, you'll actually have...
Well, we'll get someone to read it later. but my purpose is to introduce the bill, get the conversation going, and protect the free market.
And what's the bill about? What is it?
Well, there's I think 44 states that are controlling Bitcoin right now in various ways. Of course, the currency. There's different various government agencies. And I'd like to pass a federal law that says, hey, until this Bitcoin is germinated into a full industry, just like the internet, allow it to be free and allow it to be developed.
So the leave us alone, don't tread on me Bitcoin bill.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's what we want, right? We want to see this develop into an industry which create new jobs, create new industries. Just imagine if government in the beginning, in the genesis of the internet, interfered. We wouldn't have any.
Put the sales tax on the
internet. Yeah, and that's what they wanted to do in the beginning. And in the wisdom, believe it or not, the politicians said, no, we're not going to do that in the beginning. And allow the internet to explode into ways we can never imagine.
So do you have a name for this bill yet, or would people give you
I'm naming it after you.
Oh, great.
No, I think we should call it Freedom in Currency or something like that.
Right.
I haven't named it yet. But if you have a suggestion for a name, email us.
And certainly if anyone has some input as they would like to have seen this bill.
And I know there's a problem with taxation. I know there's a problem with stealing. We're just trying to balance bill. It's not the perfect bill, but remember this, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
What's your take on what Bitcoin can facilitate? So one of the concerns is Bitcoin as it relates to capital flight.
Yeah.
So America, obviously, it has its exit tax when you want to leave the country and expatriate. Or there are all these other countries, like, for instance, Cyprus, which impose great capital controls. One of the things that makes Bitcoin so great is with just a couple of letters and numbers, you can walk out of the country with your entire bank account. So as it relates to capital controls, what is your opinion on Bitcoin?
Well, there's always government interference with individual freedoms. So you're asking me, is it a good thing that government interferes with individual freedoms? And I have to go back to say no. You're blocking the system for which this nation and this, actually, quite frankly, the world. The United States is unique in that you can't say we got our wealth from natural resources. We got our individual wealth because individuals participated in the ability to create geniuses. Steve Jobs did not get a government handout. Steve Jobs didn't have the government interceding on his behalf. Yet you see the government constantly trying to pick winner and losers. You look at Cerlindo. That was a government-picked company that was supposed to succeed but failed. We can't have government interceding on behalf of commerce. Commerce does best when the individuals pick the winners and losers, not government. Some guy that has a government degree sitting up in Washington, D.C. is not the proper person to decide which industry should succeed or fail. The more free markets, the better it is for individuals. The greater the wealth around the world is indicative of free nations. It's a direct correlation. I challenge anybody to disprove that. And the United States has more and more restrictions, and as we have more and more restrictions, our GDP is down to 3%. China's has been as high as 13, 14%. What are we doing differently than China? Ironically, the socialists have less restrictions on capitalist formation. And Bitcoin's going to create an economic engine, which unfortunately for the people that are currently in government is going to be something they can't control.
How best could we maximize the effect that Bitcoin can have on politics in America?
Again, I go back to what I'd like to see. It's funny because tonight I think I met 50 different opinions, much like every libertarian, we have different opinions. But they have to coalesce behind the individual freedom. And I would hope that somebody gets together, fortunately, maybe here tonight, but get together and do a survey and actually talk to the politicians. Don't be afraid. There are humans. And say, look, this is our argument for Bitcoin. Do you support us, yes or no? It's not, I don't think they should, if you set up a dynamic which you're hostile to the people in charge, you're going to get hostility back. I'm asking the people in Bitcoin, reach out to your representative, ask them questions, don't be afraid of them. Most of them will understand you. Take the time to explain it. Take the time to explain the advantages of it. This is a fundamental change in the world. I'm honored to be part of this tonight in New York. I'm not from New York, I'm from Texas. And this is one of the most exciting times of my life to say I was here. This is very much like Steve Jobs being in the garage. Could you imagine, if you had an opportunity, would you want to be in the garage when Steve Jobs first invented it? I mean, come on, this is huge. And to be here, I'm going to remember 50 years from now, or if I'm alive, I probably won't be alive, but 20 years from now, I'm going to say, hey, I was here in 2013 on New Year's Eve when something kicked off this phenomenon. I'm just honored that I was invited here and honored that you would take time to want to talk to me. I work for the people. I don't work, you don't work for me, I work for you. And having people express their opinions here tonight was so valuable. We intend to introduce a bill, hopefully, will cause conversation. There's going to be a lot of people disagree with it, but let's move the ball forward. And don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
And, one of the things that has so much of the libertarian sort of philosophical juice behind Bitcoin is this notion of amoral money. And what I mean by that is it's kind of like the difference between a diamond and a blood diamond, where when you purchase a blood diamond, you're supporting an entire ecosystem, whereas when you purchase a diamond, it's just that. And when you purchase the dollar, when you hold your assets in dollars, you're not just doing that. It is in and of itself a political act because you're supporting the war on drugs, which is the war on young male minorities. If you look at the war on...
Yeah, but you're getting off of esoteric stuff. When the internet first opened up, they talked about it being anti-war.
Right.
Look, let's face it, it was more... we look back now on it, it's not anti-war. It is fundamentally changed the way we operate in commerce.
Right.
And I would argue that Bitcoin is... You can use a philosophical terminology, but there's industries yet to be known and commerce yet to be known that's going to change this world. And to suggest, if that's why you're doing it, that's fine, I don't have a problem with that. But I think more looking down in the future, if you can predict the future, which we can't, I would say my best guess is this is going to change the way we operate in commercial. And this is why I say this, is because at some point there's going to be a total vacuum if the dollar becomes like the Mozambique dollar or whatever, where you're printing up trillions and trillions and it costs you $100 to buy a loaf of bread. People are going to gravitate towards precious metals and Bitcoin.
So if someone wanted to know more about you or how to get involved with your political aspirations moving forward, how would they go about doing that? How would they reach out to you? How would the community in your district, as it relates to your Bitcoin constituents, reach out to you and get engaged with you?
Well, first of all, we're going to put a Bitcoin. I think we already have a Bitcoin donation page, but we also have Nick, our host, also has a Bitcoin
QR code.
You're right.
So you're going to be accepting Bitcoin donations?
Yes, but in terms of FEC, we may have to make sure we follow the law.
And that's the case with almost everything in Bitcoin. Is you'd love to do it,
but here's the thing: is that we can change that through those questionnaires and talking to your politician. The way it is now is not going to be the future is. I mean, if we say that, well, TV was black and white, it'll always be black and white. No, eventually we got colored television.
Right.
So I'm suggesting to you, the future is not here. But if you invest in the future, it will come a reality.
So for our American listeners, if they could shoot you some Bitcoin, that would be appreciated.
Man, I sure would. Plus, if they do, I'll give them a tour of the Capitol and a private dinner, and it's done. I can't promise that, but
and we'll try to get the Bitcoin community out in your district to show up full force.
Well, I'm running for U.S. Senate, and I'm taking a long shot. I had to quit the House, which I had an 80% Republican district. I could have stayed there until I was 90. But I'm really concerned about America's freedom, and the reason I ran for Senate is because Ted Cruz is the other U.S. Senator, and the current senator that's in office right now is not necessarily a libertarian, free thinker. I have a belief that I think better our nation be free individually than to vote people in that want to create more people to oversee them. I still cannot get around my mind saying, hey, I want this person to rule my life. I'm the opposite. I want less people involved in my life, not more.
Right.
And by the way, thank you for having me. And you have, by the way, you can't see this because it's by radio or podcast. He has a Bitcoin sweater on that's bright orange, and he is the hit of the party.
Oh, it's the Bitcoin Not Bomb sweatshirt. I suggest you all get it because for every one you purchase, they give one to a homeless person. So, all right, well, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.
All right, thanks.
When you shop with Bitcoin on Gift, you can get gift cards from over 200 retailers. Think of the possibilities. Not only is your holiday shopping taken care of in a snap from your Android device or on the web, but now you have a way to purchase everyday items from stores like Target, CVS, Gap, and GameStop using your Bitcoins. That's not even the best part. When you shop with Bitcoin on Gift, you get 3% back. Ready to shop? Visit GYFT.com today.
Hi, listener. Here at Let's Talk Bitcoin, we're building a global network of correspondents able to contribute on-the-ground perspective when cryptocurrency-related information comes across their filters. If you'd like to join our global conversation, send an email with your name and geographic or cultural niche to apply@letstalkbitcoin.com. Just like Bitcoin, the only barrier to entry is your time and good work. Thanks for listening.
Today, I'm very excited to be talking with Connie Gillespie. She is the founder and the executive director of the BitGive Foundation. Connie, welcome to Let's Talk Bitcoin.
Hi, thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm so glad to be able to catch up with you now because we keep missing each other at conferences. I met you over 6 months ago in San Jose for the first time at a Bitcoin conference. We kind of kept missing each other like trains passing in the night. So glad we have a chance to catch up now. What is the BitGive Foundation, first of all, for somebody who has never heard of it before?
Well, we are new, so probably a lot of folks haven't heard of us before. We're a nonprofit foundation, so very different than I think most of the entities in the Bitcoin space right now. But we're doing charitable work. There are some charities, of course, involved in Bitcoin. But we've established ourselves as more of a foundation that's sort of like a meta charity in the sense that we are taking in Bitcoin donations from the community and then giving to charitable causes on behalf of the community, and vetting those charities and looking at things on a global scale. So the concept is a lot like, say, a Packard Foundation or something of that nature, although it's not a family foundation by any means, but to be giving back from the community over the long term.
Sort of a meta charity. Did you come up with the idea for it, or did someone else? Tell me about how it was founded.
That's a great question. You referenced how we had first met in San Jose. We were at the Bitcoin Foundations conference there. I had actually just attended that conference because my brother is involved in Bitcoin pretty heavily, and he lives on the East Coast and I live in California. So it was an opportunity for me to be able to see him and to learn more about what he was up to in Bitcoin. And I really had no intentions of being, directly involved. But when I was at that conference, I really was impressed by not only what I saw to be a very promising future in Bitcoin, because I had already seen that and knew that with my brother's involvement, but personally being there with all those folks collected. There was a lot of brilliant people there, a lot of energy, a lot of entrepreneurial spirit, and quite a bunch of investors wandering around. And to me, that was a very, very key indication that this could be huge. And it really became much more clear to me that the potential was at a scale of .com boom or bigger even. And my background is in nonprofit work for environmental groups in California. I've been doing this for a long time. And one of my focuses is helping them find funding, create funding sources at the state level, find grants, and those sorts of things. So I, really saw that if Bitcoin was going to be as big as I thought it could be, that there's a lot of funding that would probably be made by the companies involved and the investors, and that if we could just get a slice of it and direct it towards charitable causes, that could really make a huge difference. I mean, on a global scale, there's so many challenges that we're facing. And I really think that the success of Bitcoin can help address those issues. So that was the concept, came out of just being in that space and with all that energy. And I started to talk to folks about it, and they were really excited. And I felt like it was something I should pursue. So I still work full time in my career in the environmental field, but I decided to start the foundation on the side, and I have been doing that as well.
That's a really inspiring story. It sounds like you went to this conference with no intentions of really making Bitcoin a big part of your life. You just said, hey, I'll say hi to my brother and see what this is all about. And then it spawned this whole thing that turned into a second job for you, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Wow. So what stage are you at with the BitGive Foundation? Are you building up charities that you want to support? Are you building up funds? Where is it at right now?
Well, we're doing all of those things. So we officially launched the organization at the end of July. And essentially prior to that, we're very focused on just getting all the paperwork and such done to enable to launch. We are awaiting our status as an exempt C3 with the IRS. So that's been a lot of the work we've been doing as well. So now we are really starting to ramp up as far as fundraising, marketing, just getting ourselves out there, getting folks to know who we are and what we're doing. And then also researching the charitable groups around the world that we'd like to be giving to and establishing criteria. But we want to really establish a process by which, we can make those decisions about where the funding may go. So a lot of that work is underway. As I mentioned, I'm kind of doing this on the side, and I'm working as well full time. So it's a lot of work, but we're chipping away at it all. And
So do you need help? Are you looking for people to volunteer and help out?
Absolutely.
Okay. So how could they do that?
Well, they could just get a hold of me at info@bitgivefoundation.org. also just check out our website and the like. But yeah, we're looking for volunteers in pretty much every area. I mean, I am looking for folks who know a lot about internet, social media, things like that, marketing, fundraising. We do have some legal services that are being provided pro bono, which is really awesome, by Perkins Coie. But we have additional needs in that area as well. So I'm really, I'm open to anybody who wants to be involved and has a skill set that might match what our needs are.
I'm wondering if sort of part of the mission maybe is to not just use Bitcoin as a force for good and to support charitable causes, but also maybe to show that Bitcoin is used for charitable purposes. There's kind of a stereotype out there, which me personally, I've been interested in Bitcoin charitable activities for quite a while. And I know that there was this survey that was done by Zero Hedge more than a year ago at this point. But that survey showed that the most common use for Bitcoins among their respondents was actually as gifts, donations, and for charitable giving. Wow. So it's not just, Bitcoin is not just to buy drugs on the internet, obviously. That's a very small portion of Bitcoin users who've ever done that. But yet there's this persistent stereotype that Bitcoin is all about these bad kind of uses. So is part of BitGive maybe also showing that Bitcoin can be used for things like charity?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And promoting that. I mean, it's very important, I think, for the Bitcoin community to be more well-rounded. It's young, and there's so much to be done, but there's a lot of focus on the technical and business and investment aspects of it, which makes sense for as young as it is. But there are so many other things that Bitcoin can do. Sometimes when I think about it, I really think that we could essentially recreate the whole world that we live in via Bitcoin, which is kind of like endless possibilities. And so working with charities and trying to do good with it is just one of many, many things I think we all should be thinking about. But to me, it's close to me and my heart and my passions. And like I was saying earlier, I just think the potential is so huge that it really should be a portion of what may come out of all this should be directed to the problems that we're facing. I mean, there's a real opportunity here to move the needle on major issues that we're facing if we can have a significant amount of funding that's available on a global scale.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
one of the things that I've noticed being in the Bitcoin community is there is this wonderful culture of generosity, because when you can send payments anywhere in the world with no friction, suddenly I think people become more inclined to do so. Have you found that that's true too?
I do think people find it really intriguing and interesting and exciting. I think with BitGive, we're fairly young and just getting started and very, I think, early in our fundraising days. So I haven't really experienced a whole lot of that sort of energy specifically for us. But definitely.
Well, what about you? I mean, you've worked in the nonprofit world as well as now starting this project in the Bitcoin nonprofit world. Do people hesitate to donate to charities, I guess, is what I'm asking, because of the friction associated with doing so? Is that an obstacle to charitable donations in the dollar world?
I think it definitely is in some circumstances, for sure. When there's political issues or people are in a position of authority or a figurehead of some sort and they don't want it to be publicly known that they're, giving to a cause of some sort that may mean something very personal to them. And I actually was talking to someone today about this, and they said, it was just an example, but they said, if I want to donate to Planned Parenthood, I may not want my church to know about it. So that's kind of an interesting example. But yeah, I think that's definitely the case in some situations for sure.
There's a lot of questions I have for you, but just sort of as a follow-up on that, I know that one of the requirements for the IRS 501c3 recognition of nonprofit status is disclosure of the names of donors, especially large donors. I think there's probably some threshold for what they have to report. But how would that be managed with Bitcoin? Is it possible to comply with that?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. I'm not sure that anyone has the answers yet, which in a sense is good because we can carry forward in almost a fashion of, well, we'll wait and see. But it's also very hard to know how we're going to be able to operate in the long term and at large scale donation level. So, we have attorneys that we're working with, but, I'm not sure that they even know. Everyone's new to the Bitcoin, how it applies to existing regulations. So we may hear from the IRS. I mean, we have our application into them. We didn't hide the fact that we're working in Bitcoin. So we may hear from them as far as what kinds of things they'd like to see. It's a really good question. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess those kind of things are going to have to be figured out as you go along. But I have some experience pursuing nonprofit status with the organization that I work with, Free Aid, and that was something that we were really concerned about because obviously if you put a Bitcoin address out there, someone could send you Bitcoin and not own up to it, right? And in some cases, why would they want to, especially if it's, for instance, they want their privacy, right? For political reasons, they don't want people to know that they support a certain cause or charity. How would we ever find their information, right, to be able to to disclose it publicly?
Right. I've talked a little bit about our attorneys with this in the sense that in the dollar world of charitable donations and also in-kind donations, they can be done anonymously. Maybe we just apply the existing rules and we look at that threshold of what the dollar amount is. And I think our plan, our mission is to be giving to environmental and public health causes. So I don't know, as long as we're giving to very stand-up, well-known organizations around the world who have their paperwork in order, that I'm not sure that it'll matter.
Right. Well, Planned Parenthood is still well known, but some people don't want their church, as you said, or whatever, to know that they donated to Planned Parenthood. So that issue's going to be there. One other thing about charities is that the blockchain is a public ledger of all the Bitcoin transactions, and that presents a tremendous opportunity for transparency and auditing of charities. Are you planning to leverage the blockchain in any way to let your donors and potential donors know, hey, look, this is where we stand in terms of our accounting and so forth?
I think we do plan on doing that. Right now, we are set up with BitPay, so everything is going through them because they process everything for free for charities.
Oh, so you're not actually holding Bitcoins? It's going to be converted to dollars?
Well, no, not necessarily. It depends. Like when we did a recent charity drive and we did convert to the currency of their choice to donate to them. But we do have holdings in Bitcoin as well. And they're actually with BitPay as well. They don't typically do that kind of service, but they are working on like a cold storage service that they will probably be rolling out, and they're holding ours in the meantime in high security for us. But as far as the transparency, don't have anything to hide. I'm not sure we don't have it all set up quite yet to do anything of that nature in the sense that it's all kind of going through BitPay. So we have one wallet address and everything's going into that one wallet address. I'm sure that can all be seen on the blockchain. Once we start having multiple projects and different campaigns and a variety of charities that we're working with and the Bitcoin donations are coming in, it'll probably be more complex. And I don't see any reason why we wouldn't share that kind of information. I just don't know right now how we will be going about doing that.
There is the potential because you can attach text to Bitcoin transactions. So potentially if there's one address that's serving as this main incoming address for donations, when coin goes out of that address, you could say attach a little note to it that says this is to fund Philippines relief efforts or whatever, this is going to the Red Cross or whatever. There is a potential for that, I suppose. Oh. But anyone could look at your Bitcoin address right now that you have, that you're taking donations to and see, okay, well, this address has had this many coins go into it, and this is when they came in. So really, that potential for auditing, I guess, is already there. At least people can have an idea of the sort of the balance that's in that address.
Absolutely. I'm still new to all this technical aspects of Bitcoin, so I have some things to learn, but, we certainly don't have anything to hide. Yeah, I mean, everything's up on the blockchain for the wallet we have. Where you may see that we've pushed coins out into cash, those have gone to either our bank account for bills or to the Save the Children group, which is our first campaign that we've done. I may be able to retroactively, I don't know, go in and signal those things on the blockchain. I really don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure how to do that. I think you have to do it at the time of the transaction, but it might be something for future reference to look into.
Yeah, absolutely.
Purse.io is a gift exchange that lets you get Bitcoins at only a 6% premium and with a credit card. How does it work? You purchase items for other Purse.io members from their Amazon wish lists. In return, you get Bitcoins in the amount of the Amazon purchase. The more people participate, the more Bitcoins will be available, so tell your friends. Get exclusive access today at Purse.io.
Let's Talk Bitcoin is heard each week by thousands of people who are participating in the new digital economy. Our listener base of Bitcoin owners, miners, investors, technologists, and merchants is growing fast. We offer a limited number of short advertising slots in each show to keep our listeners engaged and to provide maximum impact for our sponsors. If you'd like to talk to us about Let's Talk Bitcoin, send us an email at sponsors@letstalkbitcoin.com.
So volatility is an issue, obviously. If you're talking about a charity that has Bitcoin holdings, there's the potential for somebody to donate Bitcoin to the charity and then some time passes and the Bitcoin is worth a different amount or has a different amount of purchasing power than it had when it was initially donated. And this could work in both ways, right? Like the assets could grow. So there's sort of an incentive for the charity maybe to save and to really think about how they spend their Bitcoin or not. Or Bitcoin could crash and then those donations could kind of shrink. You know, how do you see BitGive, I guess, dealing with that volatility factor? It sounds like you're splitting the holdings between Bitcoin and other currency currently, but is that sort of the long-term strategy to mitigate the volatility?
You know, that's a really good question. A lot of these things we're still trying to find, figure out a long-term strategy and how we will address these things. But the short term, we are holding the donations we've received, and they have gone up significantly. Even with the latest dip, they're still 7 times over what they were when we received them.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty good.
Right, which is great. And, until we have a process established for where, how to decide where these funds go, we do plan to sit on those until we have a process established or some project comes along that makes a lot of sense. It's a really good question. I think there are a lot of things we've been talking about at the board level about, do we set a threshold below which we don't cash them out? Or do we do first coins in or first coins out? It's a very, very, very good question. And I think there's a lot of ways we could handle it. And we really haven't identified exactly how we will proceed. It's just very complicated. For one example, though, we did do the Save the Children drive for Bitcoin Black Friday, and that was really straightforward because it was one day, and we said everything we get this day is going to them, and it was for the Philippines relief effort, so the need is immediate. It's very acute. We're not waiting. We're going to give them the money right away. So that was very straightforward for us.
So you took in Bitcoin donations and then converted it to fiat currency and then sent that to the Philippines? Or did you send the Bitcoins to someone in the Philippines and they converted it? How did that work?
No, what we did was we converted the funding to our U.S. dollar currency and then donated to them in through their traditional avenues. But they were aware that it was coming from the Bitcoin community and that we were exchanging Bitcoins to send them fiat. So they are actually very close to probably accepting Bitcoin directly. But Save the Children is an extremely large, international, well-known charity. And they have a lot of questions, and their, legal folks and their finance folks have a lot of T's to cross and I's to dot. But they are, I think, going to be directly accepting Bitcoin pretty shortly. So then we could actually, be able to donate to them in Bitcoin, which would be really cool.
Is part of the idea to increase acceptance of Bitcoins among existing charities?
It's not a formal part of our mission, but it is something that just sort of naturally comes with the work. And I think it's fun, actually, because it's really interesting to get people more educated and knowledgeable about Bitcoin, helping them accept it in donations. There's BitPay and I think Coinbase too, and other services that process donations in Bitcoin for free for charities. And so it's really easy to kind of promote the use of it or help educate charities about using it. And it just kind of naturally comes with what we do.
I don't see what the problem would be for a large existing charity if they were to use a payment processor like BitPay or Coinbase, where the Bitcoin could be immediately converted into fiat. Then they wouldn't even have to have a Bitcoin address, really. All they do is just put this little API on their website and then they get dollars, but people can donate them to them using Bitcoins.
Exactly.
It's really a low barrier to entry for them. I think it would just be another way to accept donations. But there are some charities out there who specifically deal in Bitcoin and they don't really use payment processors or anything like that. Like, for instance, Sean's Outpost is a really well-known example, and FreeAid, the one that I work with. They just accept Bitcoins directly. And there is sort of an enthusiasm, I think, among the Bitcoin community for charities that do that because they're kind of keeping things in Bitcoin and then they're only going outside of the Bitcoin economy when they really, really have to.
Yeah. And I mean, we're very supportive of that. And, one of the things that I've been trying to do is just be a leader in the community to try to just draw more attention to the fact that charities can accept Bitcoin, can use Bitcoin. The community can be giving and donating, and just kind of getting that message out there more and being a leader in the community in that sense. But I think there's a lot of potential. So there's a lot more to be done. And I know groups like BitPay or companies like BitPay are out there actually trying to bring in charities to work with them. Even though they do it for free, they're really proactively trying to bring in more. So,
yeah, one thing that's getting easier, and if you were to operate a charity in Bitcoin exclusively, meaning you accepted donations in Bitcoins and then the holdings of the charity were in Bitcoin, it's kind of cool because it's getting easier and easier to buy things with Bitcoin. So, for instance, you could pay for your web hosting. You could pay for all of your website services with Bitcoin if you're a charity who holds Bitcoin. You could purchase medical supplies, for instance. You can now get gift cards on Gift that you can use to shop at CVS, Target, Amazon if you're in the U.S. You could get first aid supplies. You could get food potentially. All kinds of things that charities could do using Bitcoin to purchase items that they need to operate, basically. So I'm excited to see that getting more feasible, I guess, for charities to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really exciting.
I guess with the 501c3 application, I just wanted to return to that for a minute. I'm really curious what the IRS is going to say. And so for our listeners who are international, who aren't familiar with this term 501c3, it's a designation that the IRS, the U.S. government agency that wants to tax everybody here in the U.S., you can get an exemption if you are a charitable organization, and people can donate to the charity and deduct it from their taxes, from their taxable income. But you have to ask them for it. You have to put together a letter and an application, and it's a very long process, saying this is why we're a charity and here's da-da-da to prove it. And then they will either say yay or nay and come back to you. But they have all these requirements, they want you to be structured a certain way in terms of the organization's corporate structure. One of the things about nonprofit recognition by the government in the U.S. is I believe that the process is different for churches and religious organizations. So I've yet to see someone start the Church of Satoshi or the Church of Bitcoin and say, look at us, we're a nonprofit. We don't have to apply for this, but I'm sure that's coming. I'm sure somebody will do that at some point. But, you do have to kind of put together this whole application, which really is not geared for Bitcoin organizations. It's geared for dollars and conventional bank accounts and things like that. Were you involved at all with putting together the application for this? And how was it adapted to reflect that you're a Bitcoin organization? I guess is what I'm wondering.
That's a good question. You have lots of great questions.
Thank you. Well, this is something that I'm really interested in. So I'm glad. And thank you for, sharing all your experience and expertise on this. I really appreciate you talking about it.
I think we're all blazing new trails here. So, as much as we can share with each other and learn as we go, the better.
Yes.
Yeah. We work very closely with a law firm, Perkins Coie, and they're providing us their pro bono services to get this organization established. There's a fair amount of paperwork that needs to be done there. And then with this IRS process. And so we have a really dynamite attorney who's her entire career has been helping establish foundations and nonprofits in the U.S. And so she's very well experienced in that. And then we also have on our...
Does she know about Bitcoin? Is she familiar with Bitcoin?
Well, no, but we have on our team from them as well another attorney who is familiar with Bitcoin. And so he's providing that sort of aspect of the whole situation. So they are teaming up together and putting their minds together on all of our paperwork. So I think they could probably answer the questions a lot better than I could. But my impression of the process was that we really applied as much of existing rules and processes there is in place already for charities and nonprofits and try to figure out how and where best to indicate the Bitcoin aspects of what we're doing. And we'll see what they have to say when they come back with, their response to our application. But it also, I think, it made it really easy that we were just brand new and they ask for a lot of financials, which we don't really have a whole lot of financials because we're brand new. So I think maybe many groups are functioning for some time and have budgets and the like that they can use when they apply for a C3 status, whereas we're applying for it out the gate. And it's pretty simple right now. We don't have we haven't even finished one budget cycle. So
I'm really curious to see how that goes. And I guess just for our listeners who may not know this story, Free Aid actually at one point, the charity that I work with, filed for recognition of 501c3 status with the IRS. And we had some issues with our application and we kind of just decided not to pursue it after a while because it wasn't fitting in. And we operate just basically in Bitcoin. And we're a very small charity, so perhaps size is a factor there too. But I'm really curious to see what they have to say when an attorney prepares the statement and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. We are too. And we're really curious to see how long it takes them to respond as well.
Yeah, it can be a long process for sure in my experience. So keep us posted on that. And one last question for you, Connie. I hate to do this. If you're not comfortable talking about it, just say so and we don't have to, put this in. But I'm just curious kind of what your experiences are. I remember meeting you for the first time and we kind of looked at each other from across the room and we were like, oh my God, it's another woman at the Bitcoin conference. And, I'm sure you've noticed that the Bitcoin community is pretty is skewed male, right? And not that there's anything wrong with that, right? That's just where we're at right now as a community. And we love the guys that are involved in Bitcoin, but the fact remains that there just aren't as many women. What have your experiences sort of been as a woman who's interested in Bitcoin? And do you have anything you want to share that's related to that?
Well, sure. It's funny that you mentioned that when we first met, because I really was overwhelmed by the fact that I was at this large conference and it was 98% male. And there were very few women. And when I saw you, it was like an oasis. I'm like, oh my God, there's another woman. This is really... So that was just in May. And I've seen it change even, since then. But it's still maybe now 96% male. So, it's still quite heavily weighed in that direction. And it's understandable. It's a programming world. It's a finance world. And traditionally, those are, male focused career paths, if you will. But there's a lot of women in those fields. And I would love to see them step up and be more involved in the Bitcoin community. But there's also a lot of other aspects of Bitcoin that I think, women can come in and provide a more well-rounded community. And people are starting to call the Bitcoin space is now the Bitcoin ecosystem. And, I think that's a much more realistic explanation of how a community really needs to be working. And it opens up a lot of opportunity for different things to be happening, like charitable giving and like more, women in the space. And it's, there's a whole lot of opportunity. I think I have met quite a few amazing women who are in the Bitcoin space or the Bitcoin ecosystem. And, they're really passionate about what they're doing and they want to see more women involved as well. There's actually a group called Women in Bitcoin that is new and just getting started, but it's a gal from Trade Hill as well as BitPay who co-founded it. And they're on Facebook and Twitter, and I think they're trying to really pull together a community. And they're not being exclusive to just women as far as being involved in the group. But I think
it's not like a secret club. It's just, hey, we're here and we are in the Bitcoin community, so come join us.
Exactly. And just promoting that, getting the word out a little more that, promoting more women in Bitcoin and we welcome men to be involved in that as well. So
working in the nonprofit space outside of Bitcoin, in the conventional economy, what is the gender balance like there? Is it, I'm kind of picturing for some reason that it's more female dominated, but I could be wrong about that.
It is actually, it's pretty female dominated in the nonprofit world and especially in the environmental world. So yeah, it's almost like I have two completely different, but yet yin and yang related careers going on here.
Right. Yeah, it must be really interesting to see, you kind of cross over from the dollar world to the Bitcoin world. And then suddenly there's a very noticeable gender difference, right? Between those two places.
Absolutely.
Have you personally, have you introduced anybody in your life to Bitcoin that maybe not people who are working with you on BitGive, but just randomly people,
yes.
Friends? Yeah, tell me about that.
Absolutely, yes. Well, a lot of people think that they see it on my Facebook. I'm always posting things on Facebook. I'm talking about it, and so they have a lot of questions and those kinds of things. I just talked to someone at a party last night about all this, and people are fascinated. But I also helped a girlfriend of mine actually buy some Bitcoins and sell her Bitcoins when they went up in value. And so that was a really fun experience. And a lot of this is new for me, too. I'm not a Bitcoin expert by any means. So it's been really fun and exciting and interesting to just keep up with what's going on in the media. That's a lot of what my friends and family ask about as well. So,
actually, tell me about what's going to go on for BitGive in the new year, maybe. Are you planning any campaigns, or are you going to kind of maybe respond to the need in terms of if there are any natural disasters that happen, or what's the plan for BitGive in the next couple months?
That's a good question. Well, right now we're in a process of evaluating our resources, and we're pursuing quite a bit of opportunities. So my first focus is going to be on looking at capacity building funding. As I mentioned earlier, I'm just kind of working on this on the side as a volunteer, and our resources are pretty limited. So that's my first priority, is to start looking for funding that can help us really get off the ground and make sure we have the resources we need to really get going and make things happen. And in addition to that, of course, we're always looking for funding for the charitable causes that we'd like to give to. So that's really important as well. And we have a board meeting early in the new year. And one of the things we'll be talking about is what I would like to propose to the board is that we set up a two-prong process or structure, if you will, for giving. One is that we have the short-term projects, like if there is a need for disaster relief funds. We hope there isn't, but of course those things do happen, that we can be poised to do things like that, as well as doing sort of quarterly drives for chosen charities. So each quarter we may choose one environmental and one public health campaign to run, and they would just be running all quarter, and then we would switch them on a quarterly basis. And then on the long-term side is really where the big vision and bold stuff comes in. And We want to build a multi-million-dollar, almost like an endowment, but we're not officially going to be operating as an endowment because it's very limited when you do that you have to only give to charitable causes and operate off of the gains. And the bulk of the funding has to sit and not be touched. We would have to have, I forget now what the calculations I had, but they were in the 10 to multi-tens of millions of dollars in order for us to be able to even donate, if at all.
Which might not be impossible with Bitcoin.
Right.
Just keep holding on.
It'd be really cool if we could actually be a real true endowment and that, we were able to raise the amount of money and the value is going up so much that we can actually operate in that way. But I think feasibility wise for now, we're just kind of following that as a model in the sense of we'd like to be bringing in long-term donations that we do sit on and that do go up in value. And we also give off of those gains, but not being constrained by the legal requirements of, only being able to operate and provide giving on those gains. So essentially, we are looking at doing short-term projects so that we have we're actively giving, and over the long term collecting funds that would go into this sort of endowment pool, if you will, that we would also give off from that source as well, but in a much more long-term, sustainable kind of fashion.
Right. I could almost envision sort of a drive where, maybe the board selects a couple of charities that people could support, and then they vote with their Bitcoins by sending to a certain address of like, which one do you want the donations to go to? And then everybody wins, and it's kind of like a fun gamified thing.
That sounds fun. I like that they vote with Bitcoins. That's awesome. Yeah, that's a cool idea. Yeah, it's been fun talking to folks about this because it is kind of a new idea in the ecosystem, and people have all kinds of neat ideas like that. So I'm just collecting them and seeing what we can, what kinds of things we can do and bringing different opportunities to the board as well. So it's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so anything else you want to add before we wrap it up?
I think that we've covered a lot. I mean, I really appreciate the time, and, I just would love folks to check us out if they have a few moments. We have a website, bitgivefoundation.org. We'd love for you to check us out, and we update that pretty regularly as far as what kinds of things we're doing. We're also on Facebook and Twitter, so you can follow us on a more active basis and see what we're doing. We'd love, donations as well, and that's really easy to do on our website. And as I mentioned earlier, too, we're looking for help, volunteers, if you're interested in being on our board. It's a new organization. There's lots of opportunities. So anybody who's interested, I encourage you to get a hold of me and we can talk.
And you can reach Connie at info@bitgivefoundation.org. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Connie Gillespie, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Stephanie. It's been a pleasure.
BitGive was recorded and produced by Stephanie Murphy, edited by Denise Levine, and featured Stephanie Murphy and Connie Gillespie. The Congressman was recorded and produced by Jonathan Mohan, edited by Adam B. Levine, and featured Jonathan Mohan and Congressman Steve Stockman. Music was provided for this episode by Jared Rubens, Calvin Henderson, and Matthew Murkowski. Questions or comments? Email Adam at letstalkbitcoin.com. Have a good one.